One of these questions that comes up quite a bit, just what is Indianapolis like? What's it like to live in Indianapolis, I guess I should say. It's one of the many questions that people have. It's one of the many topics that talk about with people. And when they say, what is it like to live here? I'll usually ask, well, what are your priorities? Your priorities, if they line up with what you can find in Indianapolis or any of the cities and towns that surround Indianapolis, then you could probably have a match. But if you have a couple priorities that are off or all the priorities are off, this place probably isn't for you. And so what I mean by priorities, do you have a family? Do you want something that's really oriented towards families? Like a lot of family activities, a lot of kids' sports, or something a little bit different than that, where maybe you still have it, but it's just harder to get to. So what about sports themselves? Or what about living in a place that doesn't have mountains, doesn't have an ocean? Is there anything to do? What are you gonna do on a daily basis? Do you like to go clubbing? Do you like to stay out until 12, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning? Do you work at night? Do you work during the day? What is it that you even do for a living? Do you work remotely? Do you work in an office? Everybody's a little bit different, but there are some consistencies in priorities and what people want. In Indianapolis, again, it matches up with some of those and some it won't. So sometimes it's a balance. Maybe it hits all of them, maybe it hits 75% of them, and maybe that's good enough. Maybe just 50% is good enough. Because almost anywhere that you live, you're likely going to make sacrifices in some way. Either financial sacrifices, and that means you make less money, or maybe where you live, the actual structure you live in, is smaller than what you're used to because your money just doesn't go as far. Or it's a place where you can't own a car, or owning a car is actually really difficult and kind of impractical. And then you have other places too where there is no public transportation at all. And if you don't own at least 2 cars for your family, then it's probably going to be pretty inconvenient for you. So lots of different things to consider, of course, and that's just a short list of things that any particular family or any particular person is going to consider. But when people ask, what is it like to live in Indianapolis? I usually have an answer for that. And it's not just Indianapolis, because you have very different parts to Indianapolis. There are parts of Indianapolis that are exceptionally nice. And of course, that's an opinion. But I would say you put some of these areas up against a lot of other areas in the entire country, and they're gonna stack up. They're really, really nice places to live. The maturity, the trees, the way the homes look, how different they all are, how unique they are, and just the vibe around where those places are, pretty nice. And then there are places in Indianapolis that are really bad. And I think any big city is going to have some of those really, really bad areas. They are super rough, super worn down, and some of them are somewhat dangerous. But there are more places in Indianapolis and absolutely around Indianapolis, those cities and towns that aren't like that aren't dangerous. They are super solid places to live. So back to my answer, what I would tell everybody. So living in Indianapolis and what it's like. Is it gonna be a big clubbing scene? No. If you're 22, 23, 24, 25 years old, you're single, you have your first job, you're actually got a little bit of money to spend, and you like to go out on every Friday night, Saturday night, maybe even through the week, well, you have some options, but it's not gonna be like Paris or Barcelona or New York City, all these really exotic places where you just have endless options for nightlife. There are some places in Indianapolis, I would usually recommend those and say these might be a fit for you and your priorities right now. It may change over time, of course, but this may work right now. If you're completely opposite of that and most of your waking hours actually going to midnight would be pretty crazy for you, you have a lot more options. So I would say most of Indianapolis, most of the cities and towns that surround Indianapolis are like that. They're not gonna be for the clubbers. They're gonna be mainly for people who like just nice restaurants. They don't wanna stay out too terribly late. It doesn't get too incredibly crazy. They like activities during the day. They like to go outside and enjoy the daytime rather than the nighttime more than anything else. You know, we don't have, for those activities, mountains, oceans, but we have a lot more than what people realize, and it's a lot prettier than what people realize. Usually one of the things that I hear commonly is that I can't believe how many trees and how green everything is. Well, come in the winter, it's not that way. The trees are still here, but it's not very green anymore. Everything's bare, it's a little less green, a little more brown. You know, it's winter, so that's like that in a lot of places. Definitely like that here too. But they're shocked by that. And I'd say it probably is surprising to a lot of people. There are a lot of places in the Midwest that are more beautiful than what people realize. So if your priority is mountains and oceans, it's not gonna happen. But just some natural beauty, that can definitely happen. Absolutely. But as part of that answer, and just the surprises that you might find around here, being very likely more oriented to people that aren't into the nightlife, so even family oriented, especially the cities and towns that surround Indianapolis, very family oriented. If you're a single person, they could still be for you. They're just gonna be a lot quieter than maybe what some people want. So as far as living in Indianapolis or in all the cities and towns that surround Indianapolis, to sum it up, I would just say that it's probably, and I haven't lived in a lot of places, but I've been to a lot of places, and I will say it seems like when I come home that it's just pretty easy to live here. It doesn't mean every single day is easy. You can have very hectic days. You can create your own hectic, of course, with your family and your job, or it can just happen to you sometimes with your job. But getting around, just getting around day to day and doing your day-to-day things seems to be somewhere down the middle. And I would say Indianapolis, Indiana as a whole is like that. It's very down the middle. There aren't very many extremes here. Extremes as far as weather goes. And we get winter, we get summer, but it's always worse somewhere else. Always. And if it's really bad here, it's probably pretty bad everywhere. So this was probably a couple years ago. We had some football on the TV as an example, and we were watching the Dallas Cowboys Green Bay Packers game. So it was getting ready to come on. And it was 13 degrees for this game. And you would absolutely think that, oh yeah, well they must be playing in Green Bay. Well, they were playing in Dallas. So it was 13 degrees in Dallas, Texas. That is pretty cold for Dallas, Texas. So if it's 13 degrees in Dallas, it's probably pretty cold here. So the extremes, the worst part of the summer, the worst part of winter, you can probably find worse someplace else. Politically, Indiana is also pretty much right down the middle. A lot of people in the Midwest look to the coast for a lot of our entertainment with all of that stuff, where the extremes really happen. So we don't find that very often in Indiana as a whole. You get little pockets and certainly individual people here and there, but as a whole, no. It's really just a lot of people trying to live their best life or just trying to get by day to day, get their kids to school, get their kids home, do their job, get dinner on the table later, which can be a real struggle when you have a family and young kids. It's just a lot of work. People are caught up in that, the day-to-day of their lives and just trying to get by. They don't have time to bother with your problems and get into them a whole lot and give you a whole lot of trouble. There might be a few people here and there, but there are always a few people here and there, but the general population would really rather help you with that, and certainly at the very least, not bother you with that. So what is it like to live in Indianapolis or any of those cities and towns that surround it? You'll have to come up with your own definition for sure. But I would say as a whole, a lot of those pieces in this video kind of make it up. We do have a world stage. We do have world events here, even something like the Indy 500 and Indianapolis Motor Speedway has world events. Indianapolis has hosted the Super Bowl, hosts the NCAA Final Four, we've got the Pacers, Fever, Colts. We have big things. Those aren't necessarily world, but they're certainly prominent in the country. We have huge concerts here. We have big festivals here. We have huge conventions here. It has a phenomenal airport. It's so easy to get in and out of and travel across the country. We have great things that connect Indianapolis to other parts of the country. And if you need those things, they're here. If you want something a little quieter than that and more out there, you'll have to be more out there, or perhaps someplace else entirely. Construction, definitely have construction here, always will. Population of Indy's growing, population of all the cities and towns surrounding Indy growing. So that'll happen. If you want to avoid that, to make your life even easier, when you define that easier to live here, again, you'll probably have to be out. So this all goes back to really just the balance of Indianapolis. It has a lot, but it also doesn't have too much, and you can fall somewhere in the middle. So again, I think it's just not that difficult for the most part to live here or in most of the cities and towns that surround it. So if you have questions about how it might affect you, your family, reach out any way that you know how. We'll catch you in the next one.